Oh, hello. Sorry about that. My dog decided that, oh my God, I don't even know. I made a whole chicken tonight and I put the carcass in the garbage and somehow Jack got a hold of it. Wow. I swear to God, I thought he was going to kill me from trying to take it away from him. That sucked. A little scary. Okay, I'm just going to start. All right, Edward Spooner said, I live at 26 Fairclough Street and am a horsekeeper at Messrs. Merida's. Between 12:30 and 1 o'clock on Sunday morning, I was standing outside the Beehive Public House at the corner of Christian Street and Fairclough Street, along with a young woman. I had previously been to another barber shop at the top of beer shop, sorry, at the top of the street, and afterwards walked down. After talking for about 25 minutes, I saw two Jews come running along and shouting murder and police. They then ran as far as Grove Street and turned back. I stopped them and asked what was the matter. They replied, "A woman has been murdered." I then went round with them to Burner Street and into Du Hey, Country Road Brenda. He must think you have something. So, woman has been murdered. I then went round with them to Burner Street and into Dutefield's yard, adjoining number 40 Burner Street. I saw a woman lying just inside the gate. At that time, there were about 15 people in the yard, and they were all standing round the body. The majority of them appeared to be Jews. No one touched the body. One of them struck a match, and I lifted up the chin of the deceased with my hand. The chin was slightly warm. Blood was still flowing from the throat. I could see that she had a piece of paper doubled up in her right hand, and a red and white flower pinned on her jacket. This is the murder inquest into Elizabeth Stride. The body was lying on the side, with the face turned towards the wall. I noticed that blood was running down the gutter. I stood there for about 5 minutes before a constable came. It was the last witness who first arrived. I did not notice anyone leave while I was there, but there was a lot of people there, and a person may have gotten away unnoticed. The only means I had of fixing the time was by closing out the public houses. I stood at the top of the street for about 5 minutes, and then 25 minutes outside the public house. I should say it was about 25 minutes to one when I first went to the yard. I could not form any opinion about the body having been moved. Several persons stood round. I noticed that the legs of the deceased were drawn up, but the clothes were not disturbed. As soon as the policeman came, I stepped back and afterwards helped to fasten the gates. When I left, it was by the front door of the club. Hey, cool gamer. Before that, I searched and gave my name and address. I was also examined by Dr. Phillips. The coroner, there was no blood on the chin of the deceased, and I did not get any on my hands. Directly, I got outside the yard, I could see that it was a woman lying on the ground. The jury says, as I was going to Burner Street, I did not meet my one did meet no sorry, did not meet anyone except Mr. Harris, who came out of his house in Tiger Bay, Brunswick Street. Mr. Harris told me he had heard the policeman's whistle blowing. Mary Malcolm said, I live at 50 Eagle Street, Red Lion Square. I am married to Andrew Malcolm, a tailor. I have seen the body in the mortuary. I saw it on Sunday and twice yesterday. It is the body of my sister, Elizabeth Watts. The coroner says, you have no doubt about that? Witness says, not the slightest. Coroner states, you had some doubts at first. Witness says, I had, but not now. I saw her alive at 6:45 last Thursday evening. She came to me where I worked at the tailoring at 59 Red Lion Street. She came to me to ask to give me her a little assistance when I have been in the habit of doing off and on for the last few years. I gave her 1 cent, $1, I think it's $1, and a little short jacket. The latter is not the one she had on when found in Burner Street. She only remained with me for a few moments, and she did not say where she was going. I could not say where she was living except that it was somewhere in the neighborhood of the Taylors and Jews at the East End. I understood she was living in a lodging house. Coroner says, I understood she was living in a lodging house. And the coroner says, did you know what she was doing for a living? And then witness says, I have my doubts. Coroner, was she the worse for drink when she came to you? She was sober, but unfortunately, drink was a failing with her. Coroner, how old was she? She's 37. Was she married? Yeah, to Mr. Watts, wine and spirit merchant of Walton Street, Bath. I think his name is Edward Watts, and he is in partnership with his father, and they are in a large way of business. My sister left her home because she brought disgrace on her husband. Her husband left her because he caught her with a porter. Her husband sent her home to her poor mother, who is now dead. Hey, Zuna. She took her two children with her, but I believe the boy has since been sent to a boarding school by his aunt, Miss Watts. The other child, a girl, was dead. Sad. So she didn't have her kids. Her one male son is sent to school by her aunt, and her other child's dead, which was a girl. That's sad. I have never seen my sister in an epileptic fit, only in drunken fits. I believe she has been before the Thames Police Court magistrate on charges of drunkenness. I believe she has been let off the ground that she was subject to epileptic fits, but I do not believe she was subject to them. I believe she lived with a man who kept a coffee house at Poplar. His name was not Stride, but I could find out by tomorrow. She had ceased to live with him for some time, for he went to sea and was wrecked on the Isle of St. Paul. There was about 3 years ago. Since then, she had not lived with anyone to my knowledge. The coroner states, have you ever heard she has been in trouble with any man? No, but she has been locked up several times. I have never heard of anyone threatening her, or that she was afraid of anyone. I know of no man with her whom she had any relations, and I did not know she lived in Flower and Dean Street. I knew that she was called Long Liz. Coroner says, have you ever heard of the name Stride? She never mentioned that name to me. If she had lived with anyone of that name, I am sure she would have told me. She used to come to me every Saturday, and I always gave her 2 cents. Coroner says, did she come last Saturday? No, her visit on Thursday was an unusual one. Before she had not missed a Saturday for between 2 and 3 years. She always came at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we used to meet at the corner of Chancery Lane. On Saturday afternoon, I went there at 3:30 and remained there until 5, but deceased did not show up. On Sunday morning, when I read the paper, I wondered whether it was my sister. I had a present I had a presentiment that it was. I then went to Whitechapel and spoke to a policeman about my sister. I afterwards went to St. George's Mortuary. When I saw the body, I did not recognize it at first, as I only saw it by gaslight, but the next day I recognized it. The coroner says, did not you have some special presentiment about your sister? At about 1:20 a.m. on Saturday morning, I was lying on my bed when I felt a kind of pressure on my breast. Then I felt 3 kisses on my cheek. I also heard the kisses, and they were quite distinct. It's crazy how they believe in that stuff back then, eh? The coroner asked, did you not have some special presentiment? And then sure enough, she did. Felt pressure on her chest, and she felt 3 kisses, which she heard the noise of as well. Hmm. A juryman said, did your sister have any special mark about her? Sister says, yes, a black mark on her leg, and I saw it there yesterday. I told the police I could recognize her by this particular mark. The mark was caused by my sister being bitten by an adder some years ago, and I was bitten on the finger at the same time. What's an adder? I'll spell it. But what is an adder? What kind of dog? Here's the mark showing it to the coroner. Coroner says, has your husband seen your sister? He has seen her once or twice some 3 years ago. I have another sister and a brother who are alive, but they are not seen her for years. Coroner says, I hear it one time. You said it was your sister, and another time you said it was not. Witness states, I am sure it was. The coroner says, have you any one that can corroborate you? She states, only my brother and my sister. The disgrace will kill my sister. The best thing will be for her brother to come up. I have kept this shame from everyone. Here's the witness. Here the witness sobbed bitterly. The coroner says, Was there any special mark on your sister's feet? She says, I know she had a hollow at the bottom of one of her feet, which was a result of an accident. I have no idea what a hollow is either. The coroner said, did you recognize the clothes she wore? Witness says, no, I did not. I never took notice of what she wore, for I always was grateful to get rid of her. Well, that's nice. When she left a baby naked. Once Elizabeth Stride, the deceased, left a baby naked outside my door, and I had to keep it until she fetched it away. It was not one of the two children already mentioned, but was by some policeman or another. I do not know anyone that would do her harm, for she was a girl everyone liked. Coroner says, would your brother recognize her? I am positive he could, although he has not seen her for years. I can now recognize her by the hair. Coroner says, I think you ought to go again to the spot where you have been in the habit of meeting your sister to see if she comes again. You say she has not missed a single Saturday for 2.5 years. How about the Saturday when she was in prison? Witness says, she has always been fined and the money has been paid. Mr. Frederick William Blackwell said, I live at 100 Commercial Road, and I am a surgeon. At 10 minutes past 1 on Sunday morning, I was called to 40 Burner Street. I was called by a policeman, and my assistant, Mr. Johnson, went back with him. I followed immediately. I had dressed. I consulted my watch on my arrival, and it was just 10. 1:10. Elizabeth Stride was lying on her left side, completely across the yard. Her legs were drawn up, her feet against the wall of the right side of the yard passage. Her head was resting almost in the line of the carriageway, and her feet were about 3 yards from the gateway. The feet almost touched the wall, and the face was completely towards the wall. The neck and chest were quite warm. Also, the legs and face were slightly warm. The hands were cold. The right hand was lying on the chest and was smeared inside and out with blood. It was quite open. The left hand was lying on the ground and was partially closed, and contained a small packet of coccus wrapped in tissue paper. That's that candy stuff. Maybe it is a snake. Yeah, you're probably right. There were no rings or marks of rings on the fingers. The appearance of the face was quite placid, and the mouth was slightly open. There was a check silk scarf round the neck, the bow of which was turned to the left and pulled tightly. There was a long incision on the neck, which exactly corresponded with the lower border of the scarf. The lower edge of the scarf was slightly frayed, as if by a sharp knife. The incision in the neck commenced on the left side, 2.5 inches below the angle of the jaw, and almost in a direct line with it. It nearly severed the vessels on the left side, cut the windpipe completely in two, and terminated on the opposite side, 1.5 inches below the angle of the right jaw, but without severing the vessels on that side. The postmortem appearances will be given subsequently. Coroner says, I did not ascertain if the bloody hand had been moved. The blood was running down in the gutter into the drain. I was running in opposite direction to the feet. There was a quantity of clotted blood just under the body. Coroner says, were there no spots of blood anywhere? No. Some of the blood had been trodden about near to where the body was lying. Coroner, was there any blood on the side of the house or splashes on the wall? No. It was very dark at the time, and I only examined it by a policeman's lamp. I have not since examined the place. Coroner, did you examine the clothing? Yes. There was no blood on any portion of it. The bonnet was lying on the ground a few inches from the head. The dress was undone at the top. I know about what deceased had on, but could not give an accurate description of them. I noticed she had a bunch of flowers in her jacket. The injuries were beyond the possibility of infliction. Sorry, my bad. There's a few options for the hollow. I don't know what that would mean. The hollow. What is hollow on her feet? Yeah, I don't know what it would be. Um, I mean, it could be, I'd say bruise, but a bruise isn't hollow. Um, I have no idea. I really can't think of anything. Yeah, some sort of holes, but like it was, yeah, I guess holes from an accident, apparently. Hmm. I have no idea. Indents. Hey, Alberta. I hope you're doing well. Coroner says, how long had the deceased been dead when you saw her? Witness states, from 20 minutes to half an hour when I arrived. It was a very mild night. It was not raining at the time. There was no wet on deceased clothing. Did oh scared me. What are you two doing? Tapes. Daily, stop. You're in his spot. Ash, come here, honey. Come here. Come on, Dill. You haven't slept since yesterday. Oh wow. There was no wet on the deceased's clothing. Deceased would have bled to death comparatively slowly on account of the vessels on the one side only being severed and the artery not completely severed. Deceased could not have cried out after the injuries were inflicted as the windpipe was severed. I felt the heart and found it quite warm. My assistant was present all the time. Dr. Phillips arrived from 20 minutes to a half an hour after my arrival, but I did not notice the exact time. The coroner says, could you see where there was a woman there when you went in? Witness says, yes, the doors were closed when I arrived. I formed the opinion that the murderer first took hold of the silk scarf at the back of it and then pulled the deceased backwards, but I cannot say whether the throat was cut while the woman was standing or after she was pulled backwards. Deceased would take about a minute and a half to bleed to death. I cannot say whether the scarf would be tightened sufficiently to prevent deceased calling out. At this stage, the inquiry was adjourned until today. Okay, so you were pretty much right then. Yeah. Hollow, concave, sunken, dimpled. Okay. The next report on the resumed inquest appeared in the Times on Thursday, 4th October, 1888, on page 10. The East End murders. Yesterday afternoon, Mr. Win E. Baxter, coroner for the Southeastern Division of Middlesex, resumed his inquiry at the Vestry Hall, Cable Street, George's in the East, respecting the death of Elizabeth Stride, who was found murdered in Burner Street on Sunday morning last. Dispector. Detective Inspector E. Reed H. Division again watched the case on behalf of the Criminal Investigation Department. Elizabeth Tanner stated, I live at 32 Flower and Dean Street, Spitalfields, and am a widow. I am the deputy of number 32, which is a common lodging house. I have seen the body in the mortuary and recognized the features of the deceased as a woman who had lodged off and on at the lodging house for 6 years. I knew her by name, of Long Liz. I do not know her right name. She told me she was a Swedish woman, but never told me where she was born. She told me she was a married woman, and that her husband and children went down in the ship Princess Alice. The witness states, at about 6:30 on Saturday afternoon, I do not know the name of her husband or what occupation he had followed. When I last saw Elizabeth Stride, she was in the Queen's Head Public House, Commercial Street. I went back to the lodging house and did not see any more of her. At that time, deceased had no hat or coat on. I saw her in the kitchen of the lodging house, and then I went to another part of the building and never saw her again until I saw her dead body and the mortuary this afternoon. Coroner says, are you sure it's her? Witness states, I'm quite sure. I recognize the features and by the fact that she had lost the roof of her mouth. She told me that happened when the Princess Alice went down. How do you lose the roof of your mouth? What does that mean? Like all of your top teeth? The coroner says, was she on board the ship at the time? Witness, yes, and it was during the time her mouth was injured. Coroner says, was she at the lodging house on Friday night? Yes, on Thursday and Friday nights, but on no other night during the week. She did not pay for her bed on Saturday night. Coroner says, do you know her male acquaintances? Only one, and I did not know his name. She left the man she was living with on Thursday to come and stay at my lodging house. This is what she had told me. You're not sure either. The coroner says, have you seen this man? Yes, I saw him on Sunday evening. The coroner says, do you know if she has ever been up at the Thames Police Court? Witness says, I do not. Coroner, do you know any other place where she has lived? Witness says, only Fashion Street. Coroner, do you know if she had a sister living in Red Line Square? Witness, I do not. Coroner, what sort of woman was she? Witness, she was a very quiet and sober woman. Okay, that doesn't make sense. Elizabeth Stride was not quiet and she was not sober. I think they got it wrong here. This witness is completely wrong. Coroner says, "Did she stop out late at night?" The witness said, "Sometimes." Coroner, "Do you know if she had any money?" The witness says, "I do not. On Saturday, she cleaned the rooms for me and I gave her 6D." Coroner says, "Have you seen her clothes?" Witness, "Yes. I cannot say if the two handkerchiefs belonged to her. The clothes she was wearing were the ones she usually wore, and they are the same she had on Saturday. I recognized the long jacket as belonging to her." Coroner, "Did she ever tell you she was afraid of anyone?" "No, and I never heard her say that anyone had threatened to injure her." Coroner, it is a common thing for people to have been lodging in your place and not come back?" "Yes, I took no notice of it. I was sent to go for the mortuary." A juryman says, "Do you remember the hour she came to the lodging house?" The witness states, "I do not. Although I saw her and took $4 from her for her lodging, at that time she was wearing the long jacket I have seen in the mortuary. I did not see her bring any parcel with her." Inspector Reed says, "Have you ever heard the name of Stride mentioned in connection with her?" The witness states no. A juryman says, "How long had the deceased been away from your house before last Thursday?" "About 3 months, but I have seen her during the time, sometimes once a week and sometimes nearly every day." Coroner, "Do you understand what she was doing?" "She told me she worked among the Jews and was living with a man in Fashion Street." Coroner, "Could she speak English well?" "Yes, and Swedish as well." Coroner, "When she spoke English, could you tell she was a foreigner?" Witness said no. Coroner says, "Was there much association between her country and her country people?" No. Coroner says, "Have you ever heard of her having a childhood broken limb?" Witness says, "I have not heard her say. I have never heard her carry on a conversation in the Swedish language, but she told me herself she was Swedish." Catherine Lane, 32, Flower and Dean Street said, "I am a charwoman and am married to Patrick Lane, a dock laborer. We live together at the lodging house and have been living there since the 11th of February of this year. I have seen the body of Elizabeth Stride in the mortuary and recognized it as Long Liz, who lived in the same lodging house. Lately, she had only been there since Thursday last. I have known her for 6 or 7 years. During the time she was away, she called at the lodging house, and I used frequently to see her in Fashion Street where she was living. I spoke to the deceased on Thursday between 10 and 11 in the morning. She told me she had a few words with the man she was living with and left him. I saw her on Saturday afternoon when she was cleaning the deputy's rooms. I last saw her between 7 and 8 o'clock on Saturday evening. She was then in the kitchen and had a long jacket and black hat on." Coroner says, "Did she tell you where she was going?" "She did not. When she left the kitchen, she gave me a piece of velvet and asked me to mind it until she came back. The deputy would always mind things for the lodgers, and I do not know why she asked me to mind the velvet for her. Elizabeth showed me the piece of velvet on the previous day. I knew Elizabeth had 60 when she left, and she showed me the money, but I cannot say if she had any more money besides that. Elizabeth did not tell me she was coming back. I do not think she had been drinking." Coroner, "Do you know anyone who is likely to have injured her?" "No. I have heard her say she was a foreign woman, and she told me that at one time she lived in Devonshire Street, Commercial Road. I have never heard her say that at one time she lived at Poplar. She told me she had had a husband and that he was dead. Elizabeth never told me she had been threatened or that she was afraid of anyone. I know nothing about her history beyond what I have stated. I am satisfied it is she. I could tell by her actions that she was a foreign woman and did not bring all her words out plainly. I have heard her speaking to persons in her own language." A juryman says, "Did you ever hear her say she had a sister?" "No, never." Coroner says, "Do you know what she has been doing lately?" The witness stated, "I do not." Charles Preston stated, "I live at 32 Flowerdean Street, Spitalfields, and am a barber by occupation. I have been lodging there for about 18 months. I have seen Elizabeth there and identified her body on Sunday afternoon in the mortuary. I am quite sure the body is that of Long Liz. I last saw her alive on Saturday evening between 6 and 7 o'clock. At that time, she was in the kitchen of the lodging house and was dressed ready to go out. She asked me for the loan of a clothes brush." What is that, like a lint roller? "At that time she had on a black jacket, trimmed with fur, and it is the same one I have seen in the mortuary. She wore a colored striped silk handkerchief round her neck, and it was the same as I saw in the mortuary. I have not seen her with a pocket handkerchief, and am unable to say if she had two. I always understood from Elizabeth that she was a Swede by birth and was born at Stockholm, that she came to England in the service of foreign gentlemen. I think she told me that she was about 35 years of age. She told me she had been married and that her husband was drowned at the foundering of the Princess Alice. I have some recollection that deceased told me her husband was a seafaring man. I have heard her say she had a coffee house at Crisp Street, Poplar, but she did not say she had often been at the Thames Police Court. I have known her to be in custody on one after Saturday afternoon for being drunk and disorderly at the Queen's Head Public House, Commercial Road. She was let out on her own bail on the Saturday morning. That was some 4 or 5 months ago. I have never heard her say that she had met with an accident. She did not tell me where she was going on Saturday evening and never mentioned what time she was coming back. At times, the lodgers did not pay for their beds until just before going to bed. When Elizabeth was locked up, it was late in the afternoon or towards the evening time. She had always given me to understand her name was Elizabeth Stride and that her mother was still living in Sweden. I have heard her speak in fluently in a foreign language to person in the lodging house. It's not sticky, it was more like a hairbrush. Yeah, okay. Michael Kidney stated, I live at 38 Dorset Street, Spitalfields, and am a waterside laborer. I have seen the body in the mortuary, and it is that of a woman whom I lived with. I have no doubt whatsoever about it. Coroner, do you know what her name was? Elizabeth Stride. I have known her for about 3 years, and she has been living with me nearly all that time. Coroner, do you know what her age was? Between 36 and 38. She told me she was Swede and that she was born at Stockholm, that her father was a farmer, and that she came to England for the purpose of seeing the country. She afterwards told me that she had come to England as a servant to a family. Coroner, had she any relatives in England? Only some of her mother's friends. She told me she was a widow and that her husband had been a ship's carpenter belonging to Sheerness. She also told me that her husband had kept a coffee house at Chris Street, Popular, and that he was drowned on the Princess Alice. Coroner says, you had a quarrel with her on Thursday? No. I last saw the deceased alive on Tuesday week. Coroner, did you quarrel then? No. I left her in Commercial Street as I was going to work. Coroner, did you expect her to meet you later on? I expected her to be at home, but when I got home, I found that she had been in and gone out. I did not again see her until I identified the body in the mortuary. She was perfectly sober when I last saw her. She was subject to going away whenever she thought she would. During the 3 years I have known her, she has been away from me altogether about 5 months. I have cautioned her the same as I would a wife. Coroner, do you know anyone she has picked up with? I have seen the address of someone with the family she was living with at Hyde Park, but I cannot find it. Coroner, that is not what I asked you. Do you think she went away with anyone else? I do not think that, for she liked me better than anyone else. It was drink that made her go away, and she always returned without my going after her. I do not believe she left me on Tuesday to go with any other man. Coroner, had she money at the time? I do not think she was without any money, considering the money I gave her to keep the house. Coroner, do you know of anyone that was likely to have run foul of her? On Monday night, I went to Leman Street Police Station for a detective to act on my information, but I could not get one. Coroner, it is not too late yet. Can you give us any information now? I have heard something, and that leads me to believe that had I been able to act the same as the detective, I could have got a lot more information. When I went to the station, I was intoxicated. I asked for a young detective. I told the inspector at the station that if the murder occurred on my beat, I would shoot myself. I have been in the army. Everybody's drunk. I mean, cops, freaking murderers, prostitutes, you name it. Everybody's drunk. I wonder why they couldn't solve the goddamn crime. I didn't mean to make it. I'm sorry, I had to laugh at that just because every time I turn around, all these witnesses, even inspectors, all of them, they're always drunk. Oh my god. Inspector Reed, will you give me any information now? The witness says, I believe I could catch the man if I had the proper force at my command. If I was to place the man myself, I could capture the murderer. He would be caught in the act. Inspector Reed. Then you have no information to give. No. The coroner. Have you heard of a sister of the deceased giving her money? No, but Mrs. Malcolm, who stated she was sister to Elizabeth, is very much like her. Coroner says, had deceased ever had a child by you? No, she told me a policeman used to see her at Hyde Park before she was married to Stride. I never heard her say she had a child by a policeman. Elizabeth told me she was the mother of 9 children. Two were drowned in the Princess Alice with her husband, and the remainder are in a school belonging at the Swedish church. The school is somewhere on the other side of the Thames. I have also heard her say that some friend of her husband had two of the children. I thoroughly believe the deceased was a Swede and came from a superior class. She could also speak Yiddish. Both Elizabeth and her husband were employed on board the Princess Alice. Edward Johnson said, I live at 100 Commercial Road and am assistant to Doctors K and Blackwell. About 5 or 10 minutes past 1 on Sunday morning, I received a call from the constable 436H. After informing Dr. Blackwell, who was in bed, of the nature of the case, I accompanied the constable to Berner Street. In a courtyard adjoining 40 Berner Street, I was shown the figure of a woman lying on her left side. There was a crowd of people in the yard and some policemen. No one was touching the deceased, and there was some very little light. What there was came from the policemen's lanterns. I examined the woman and found an incision in the throat. The wound appeared to have stopped bleeding. I also felt the body to see if it was warm and found it was all warm with the exception of the hands, which were quite cold. The dress was not undone, and I undid it to see if the chest was warm. I did not move the hat at all and left it exactly as I found it. The body was not moved while I was there. The knees were nearer to the wall than the head. There was a stream of blood reaching down the gutter. It was all clotted blood. There was very little blood near the rock, as nearly all of it had run away in the direction away from the legs. As soon as Dr. Blackwell arrived, I handed the case to him. Coroner, did you look at the hands? No. I saw the left hand was lying away from the body and the arm was bent. The right arm was also bent. The left hand might have been on the ground. Coroner, was there any mark of a footstep on the stream of blood? No. I was looking at the body and not at those around me. As soon as Dr. Blackwell came, he looked at his watch and it was then 1:16. I was there 3 or 4 minutes before Dr. Blackwell. Coroner, did you notice the bonnet of the deceased? Yes, it was lying on the ground beyond the head of Elizabeth to the distance of 3 or 4 inches. I did not notice the paper in the left hand. The gates were not closed when I got there, but they were shortly afterwards. Thomas Coram said, I live at 67 Plumbers Road, Mile End, and am employed at a. They spell coconut weird. They spell it coconut at a coconut warehouse. On Sunday night, I was coming away from friends at 16 Bath Gardens, Brady Street. I was walking on the right-hand side of the Whitechapel Road towards Aldgate. When opposite number 253 crossed over and saw a knife lying on the doorstep. Number 252 was a laundry business, and there were 2 steps leading to the front door. I found the knife on the bottom step. That is the knife I found, witness being shown a long bladed knife. The handkerchief produced was wrapped around the handle. It was folded and then twisted round like the handle. The handkerchief was blood-stained. I did not touch them. A policeman came towards me, and I called his attention to them. Corner. The blade of the knife is dagger-shaped and is sharpened on one side. The blade is about 9 inches or 10 inches long, I should say. Witness. The policeman took the knife to the Lehman Street police station, and I went with him. Coroner. Were there many people passing at the time? I should think I passed about a dozen between Brady Street and where I found the knife. Coroner. Could it easily be seen? Yes, it was light. Coroner. Did you pass a policeman before you got to the spot? Yes, I passed there. It was about 12:30 at night. Constable Joseph Dragg, 282H, stated at 12:30 on Monday morning, I was on the fixed point duty in the Whitechapel Road opposite Great Garden Street. I saw that the last witness, stooping down at a doorway opposite number 253. I was going towards him when he rose up and beckoned me with his finger. He then said, Policeman, there's a knife down there. I turned on my light and saw a long bladed black knife lying on the doorstep. I picked up the knife and found it was smothered with blood. The blood was dry. There was a handkerchief bound round the handle and tied with a string. The handkerchief also had bloodstains on it. I asked the last witness how he came to see it. He said I was looking down. when I saw something white. Yeah, that's how it's supposed to be spelled, right? It's coconut. Theirs was literally spelled like cocoa and then ANAUNT, like astronaut. At like the end of astronaut is weird. But I figured it. Yeah. Or the way they spell connection, ours is CT, theirs is X. Yeah. I then asked him what he did out so late, and he replied, I've been to a friend's in Bath Gardens. He then gave me his name and address, and we went to the police station together. The knife and the handkerchief produced are the same. Coroner, what is the last witness sober? This one was sober. His manner was natural, and he said where he saw the knife, it made his blood run cold, and added that nowadays they heard of such funny things. Okay. When I passed, I should have undoubtedly seen the knife. I was passing there continually. Some little time before a horse fell down opposite the place where the knife was found. I insisted in getting the horse up, and during that time, a person might have laid the knife down on the step. I would not be positive that the knife was not there a quarter of an hour previously, but I think not. About an hour previous. I'm sorry. Feel bad, but I'm laughing at the horse. Poor thing fell down. I wonder if the horse was drunk. I'm gonna do this at this point. Oh, so I insisted on getting her horse up. About an hour previously, the landlady let out some woman, and the knife was not there then. I handed the knife to Dr. Phillips on the Monday afternoon. It was then sealed and secured. Dr. George Baxter Phillips said, I live at 2 Spital Square. I was called at 1:20 on Sunday morning. How many friggin' this is crazy. All the doctors and that are here and the police officers and the witnesses and jury and just random people. I mean, this is a lot. I found Chief Inspector West and Inspector Pinhorn in possession of a body, which had already been seen by Dr. Blackwell, who arrived some time before me. The body was lying on the near side, and the face turned towards the wall. The head up the yard was with the feet towards the street. The left arm was extended, and there was a packet of those candies in the left hand. A number of these were in the gutter. I took them from her hand and added them to Dr. Blackwell, handed them to Dr. Blackwell. The right arm was over the belly, the backhand when the wrist was on it with clotted blood. The legs were drawn up, the feet close to the wall. The body and face were warm and the hand cold. The legs were quite warm. Deceased had a silk handkerchief round her neck and it appeared to be slightly torn. I have since ascertained it was cut. This corresponded with the right angle of the jaw. The throat was deeply gashed, and there was an abrasion of the skin, about 1 1/4 in diameter, apparently stained with blood under the right brow. At 3 p.m. Monday, at St. George Mortuary, in the presence of Dr. Rygate and Mr. Johnson, Dr. Blackwell and I made a post-mortem examination. Dr. Blackwell kindly consented to make the dissection. Rigor mortis was still thoroughly marked. There was mud on the left side of the face, and it was matted in the head. We then removed the clothes. The body was fairly nourished. Over both shoulders, especially the right, and under the collarbone and in front of the chest, there was a bluish discoloration, which I have watched and have seen on 2 occasions since. There was a clean cut incision on the neck. It was 6 inches in length and commenced 2.5 inches in a straight line below the angle of the jaw, 3/4 inches over an undivided muscle, and then becoming deeper, dividing the sheath. The cut was very clean and deviated a little downwards. The artery and the vessels contained in the sheath were all cut through. I thought they didn't cut the artery, just the vessels, only on the one side. No, I could be wrong. The cut through the tissue on the right side was more superficial and tailed off to about 2 inches, both the right angle of the jaw. The deep vessels on that side were uninjured. From this is what evident that the hemorrhage was caused through the partial servants of the left carotid artery. Decomposition had commenced in the skin. Dark brown spots were on the interior surface of the left chin. There was a deformity in the bones of the right leg, which was not straight, but bowed forwards. There was no recent external injury saved to the neck. The body being washed more thoroughly, I could see some healing sores. The lobe of the left ear was torn, as if from removal or wearing through of an earring, but it was thoroughly healed. On removing the scalp, there was no sign of bruising or extra vesation of blood. The skull was about a sixth of an inch in thickness, and the brain was fairly normal. The left lung had old adhesions to the chest wall, which was fairly normal. Oops. The left lung had old adhesions to the chest wall, the right slightly. Both lungs were unusually pale. There was no fluid in the pericardium. The heart was small, the left ventricle firmly contracted, and the right slightly so. There was no clot in the pulmonary artery, but the right ventricle was full of dark clot. The left was firmly contracted so as to be absolutely empty. The stomach was large, and the mucous membrane only congested. It contained partly digested food, apparently consisting of cheese, potato, some sort of farinaceous powder, whatever the hell that means. All the teeth on the left lower jaw were absent. On Tuesday, I again went to the mortuary to observe the marks on the shoulder. I found in the pocket of the underskirt of the deceased the following articles: key as if belonging to a padlock, a small piece of lead pencil, a pocket comb, a broken piece of comb, a metal spoon, some buttons, and a hook. Like, examining her jacket, I found that, while there was a small amount of mud on the right side, the left was well plastered with mud. I have not seen the two pocket handkerchiefs. I will answer any questions put to me, but as there is another case pending, I think I had better stop here. Coroner, what is the cause of death? It is undoubtedly from the loss of blood from the left carotid artery and the division of the windpipe. Coroner, did you examine the blood at Burner Street? I did. The blood had run down the waterway to within a few inches of the side entrance of the corner. Was there any spots of blood on the wall? I could trace none. Roughly estimating it, I should say there was an unusual flow of blood considering the stature and the nourishment of the body. At this point, the inquiry was adjourned until Friday morning. There then follows in this report in the Times some interesting correspondence. The following correspondence has been sent to us for publication. Office of Board of Works, Whitechapel District 15, Great Alley Street, Whitechapel, October 7th. Sir, at a meeting of the Board of Works for the Whitechapel District, a resolution was passed, of which the following is a copy: that this board regards with horror and alarm the several atrocious murders recently perpetrated within the district of Whitechapel and its vicinity, and calls upon Sir Charles Warren so to regulate and strengthen the police force in the neighborhood as to guard against any repetition of such atrocities. And by direction of the board, the copy resolution is forwarded to you in the hope that it will receive your favorable consideration. I am Colonel Sir Charles Warren, GCMG. Hey, Teresa. No, don't worry about it. I was dry as hell. Your sleep sucks, and I know that, so it's okay. Don't worry about it. Oh my god, I love this stuff. It smells like chocolate. Hey, Kimmy. Police notice to the occupier. On the mornings of Friday, 31st August, Saturday, 8th, and Sunday, 30th September 1888, women were murdered in or near Whitechapel, supposed by someone residing in the immediate neighborhood. Should you know of any person to whom suspicion is attached, you are earnestly requested to communicate at once with the nearest police station. Metro Police Office, 30 September 1888. Oh my god, I didn't fall asleep till 2. Sir, in reply to a letter of the second something inspector? Maybe. From the clerk of the Board of Works for the Whitechapel District transmitting a resolution of the board with regard to the recent atrocious murders perpetrated in and about Whitechapel. I have to point out that the carrying out of your proposals as to regulating and strengthening the police force in your district cannot possibly do more than guard or take precautions against any repetition of such atrocities, so long as the victims actually, but unwittingly, connive at their own destruction. Ouch. Statistics show that London, in comparison to its population, is the safest city in the world to live in. The prevention of murder directly cannot be affected by any strength of the police force, but is reduced and brought to a minimum by rendering it most difficult to escape detection. In the particular class of murder now confronting us, however, the unfortunate victims appear to take the murderer to some retired spot and to place themselves in such a position that they can be slaughtered without a sound being heard. The murder, therefore, takes place without any clue to the criminal being left. I wonder if they could test back then if there was like ether involved. There's no way a woman wouldn't scream or anything. I mean, if you're gonna get, sliced and diced, I sure as hell will be kicking and screaming, and not one of these women did. So I think he on some sort of a cloth, handkerchief perhaps, put this ether because I'm pretty sure ether was what they used back then, was it not? To put people out for, I don't know, pulling out teeth and surgery and stuff? I'm probably wrong, but or read and watch too many things. But I would think that, and then just come up slowly behind them and go like that, and before they had a chance to do anything, they'd be out. I have to request and call upon your board as popular representatives to do all in your power to dissuade the unfortunate women about Whitechapel from going into lonely places in the dark with any persons, whether acquaintances or strangers. I have also to point out that yeah, their words are so weird. I don't know what that means. I have also to point out that the purlieus about Whitechapel are most imperfectly lighted and that darkness is an important assistant to crime. I can assure you, for the information of your board, that every nerve has been strained to detect the criminal or criminals and to render more difficult further atrocities. You will agree with me that it is not desirable that I should enter into particulars as to what the police are doing in the matter. It is most important for good results that our proceedings should not be published, and the very fact that you may be unaware of what the detective department is doing is only the stronger proof that it is doing its work with secrecy and efficiency. That's it. Chlorophyll. Thank you. I would say ether. Is it both or is it just chlorophyll? Where do I keep getting ether from? I don't know. But yeah, I think it's like the same thing, isn't it? I just know there's like this little medicine bottle, pour it on a rag, go like this, and then a large force of police has been drafted into the Whitechapel district to assist those already there to fill extent necessary to meet the requirements. But I have to observe that the Metropolitan Police have not large reserves doing nothing and ready to meet emergencies, but every man has his duty assigned to him. And I can only strengthen the Whitechapel district by drawing men from duty in other parts of the metropolis. You will be aware that the whole of the police work of the metropolis, oh my God, Metropolis has to be done as usual while the extra work is going on, and that at such a time as the extra precautions have to be taken to prevent the commission of other classes of crime being facilitated through the attention of the police being diverted to one special place and object. I trust that your board will assist the police by persuading the inhabitants to give them every information in their power concerning any suspicious characters in the various dwellings for which object 10,000 handbills, a copy of which I enclose, have been distributed. I have read the reported proceedings of your meeting, and I regret to see that the greatest misconceptions appear to have arisen in the public mind as to the recent action in the administration of the police. I beg you will dismiss from your minds as utterly fallish the numerous anonymous statements as to recent changes stated to have been made in the police force, of a character not conducive to efficiency. It is stated that the Reverend Daniel Gretorix, I think that's what they're trying to say, announced to you that one great cause of police inefficiency was a new system of police whereby constables were constantly changed from one district to another, keeping them ignorant of their beats. I have seen the statement made frequently in the newspapers lately, but it's entirely without foundation. The system at present in use has existed for the last 20 years, and constables are seldom or never drafted from their districts except for promotion or from some particular cause. Notwithstanding the many good reasons why constables should be changed on their beats, I've considered the reason on the other side to be more cogent, and have felt that they should be thoroughly acquainted with the districts in which they serve. And with regard to the detective department, a department relative to which I think I have no idea what they're trying to say because they don't spell right. Re- Retice? Retense. Which retense is always most desirable. I think that's it. I may say that a short time ago I made arrangements which still further reduced the necessity for transferring officers from districts which they knew thoroughly. I have to call attention to the statement of one of your members that in the consequence of the change in condition of Whitechapel in recent years as to revision of the police argument is necessary, and I shall be very glad to ascertain from you what changes your board consider advisable, and I may assure you to propose you that your proposal will receive from me every consideration. I am, sir, your obedient servant, Charles Warren, the chairman, Board of Works, Whitechapel District. The next report on Elizabeth Stride inquest appears in the Times of Saturday 6th, October 1888, page 6. It's just crazy to me that they have all those reports in the freaking newspaper. I mean, everything out there. I get we had newspapers, read all about it and all that stuff, but they're like right on it. But the way they do it's like the court proceedings take place also in the newspaper. It's kind of weird. I think this crab is like a stain. I just want to eat it. It smells like chocolate. So sparkly. I don't know. It's not really, well, it's a lip gloss, but dries up quick. Yesterday afternoon, Mr. Whitney Baxter, coroner for the Southeastern Division of Middlesex, resumed his inquiry at the Vestry Hall, Cable Street, St. George, in the East, respecting the death of Elizabeth Stride, who was found murdered in Berners Street, George's, on the early morning of Sunday last. Superintendent T. Arnold and Detective Inspector Reed, H. Division, watched the case on behalf of the Criminal Investigation Department. Dr. Phillips was recalled and said, after the last examination in company with Dr. Blackwell and Dr. Brown, I went to the mortuary and examined more carefully the roof of the mouth. I cannot find any injury to or absence of anything from the mouth. What? But didn't I just read that her whole roof of her mouth, there was nothing there, it was gone. From an accident, from the boat that her husband was killed on and her kids. I'm confused. I examined more carefully the roof of the mouth. I cannot find any injury to or absence of anything from the mouth. That's strange to me. I have also carefully examined the two handkerchiefs and have not found any blood on them. I believe the stains on the larger one were fruit stains. I'm convinced that the deceased had not swallowed either skin or seed of any grape within many hours of her death. The abrasion which I spoke of on the right side of the neck was only apparently an abrasion, for on washing it, the staining was removed and the skin was found to be uninjured. The knife that was produced on the last occasion was submitted to me by Constable 282H. On examination, I found it to be such a knife as would be used in a chandler's shop, called a slicing knife. It had blood upon it, which was similar to that of a warm-blooded being. It had been recently blunted, and the edge turned by apparently rubbing on a stone. It evidently was before that a very sharp knife. Such a knife could have produced the incision and injuries to the neck of the deceased, but it was not such a weapon as I would have chosen to inflict injuries in this particular place. And if my opinion as regards the position of the body is correct, the knife in question would become an improbable instrument as having caused the incision. Coroner says, could you give us any idea of the position of the victim? Witness says, I have come to the conclusion that the deceased was seized by the shoulders, placed on the ground, and that the perpetrator of the deed was on a right side when he inflicted the cut. I am of opinion that the cut was made from the left to the right side of the deceased, and therefore arises the unlikelihood of such a long knife having inflicted the wound described in the neck, taking into account the position of the incision. Coroner, was there anything in the cut that showed the incision first made was done with a pointed knife? No. Coroner, have you formed any opinion how the right hand of the deceased was covered with blood? No. That is still a mystery. I may say I am taking it as fact that the hand always remained in the same position in which he found it, resting across the body. Coroner, how long had Elizabeth Stride been dead when you arrived? About within an hour, she was alive. Coroner, would the injury take long to inflict? Only a few seconds. It might be done in 2 seconds. Coroner, does the presence of the candy in her hand show that it was done suddenly, or would it simply show a muscular grasp? Witness says, no, I cannot say. You will remember some of the candies were found in the gutter. I have seen several self-inflicted wounds more extensive than this one, but then they have not divided the carotid artery. You will see by that, as the other cases, there appears to have been a knowledge where to cut the throat. Coroner, was there any other similarity between this and Chapman's case? Witness, there's a great dissimilarity in Chapman's case. The neck was severed all around down to the vertebral column, the vertical bone being marked, and there had been an evident attempt to separate the bones. Coroner, would the murderer be likely to get blood-stained? Witness says not necessarily, for the commencement of the wound and the injury to the vessels would be far away from him, and the stream of blood, for stream it would be directed away from him and towards the waterway already mentioned. There was no perceptible sign of an anesthetic having been used. Okay, so now they're saying that there is no anesthetic being used. Oh, okay, Zuna. Oh, I'll put the page number in the live. Right now it's 182. And I think I'll stop at 182. Yeah, it'll be 182, Zuna. There was no perceptible sign of an anesthetic having been used. The absence of noise is the difficult question in this case, and under the circumstances to account for, but it must not be taken for granted that I assume that there was no noise. If there was an absence of noise, there was nothing in this case that I can account for. She might have called out and not have been heard, as I said before. If there was a noise, I cannot account for it. Foreman said, was the wound caused by drawing the knife across the throat? Witness says, undoubtedly. My reason for supposing deceased was injured when on the ground was partly on account of the absence of blood anywhere but on the left side of the body and between the side and the wall. The coroner, was there any sign of liquor in the stomach? Witness says there was no trace of it. Dr. Blackwell recalled and said, I have little to say except to confirm Dr. Phil's statement. It's Dr. Phillips, but I said Dr. Phil. I removed the candy from the left hand, which was nearly open. The packet had lodged between the thumb and the forefinger, and had been almost hidden. That account for its not having been seen by several of those around. I believe the hand relaxed after the injury was inflicted, as death would arise from fainting owing to the rapid loss of blood. I wish to say that, taking into consideration the absence of any instrument, it was impossible that Elizabeth Stride could have committed suicide. With respect to the knife which was found, I should say I concur with Dr. Phillips in his opinion that although it might have possibly inflicted the injury, it was extremely unlikely that such an instrument was used. The murderer, using a sharp rounded pointed instrument, would severely handicap himself, as he could only use it in one way. He was informed that the slaughterers always use round, pointed instruments. Coroner. No one suggested anything about a slaughterer. It is your suggestion that this was done by a slaughterer? Witness says, no, I concur with Dr. Phillips as to the post-mortem appearances. There were some pressure marks on the shoulders. They were not regular bruises, and there was no abrasion of the skin. A juryman says, do you know how these marks were likely to have been caused? Witness states, by two hands pressing on the shoulders. Did you see any grapes in the yard? No, I did not. Sven Olsen said, I live at 36 Prince Square, and I am clerk to the Swedish church in that square. I saw the body of the deceased in the mortuary on Tuesday morning. I have known deceased for about 17 years. Coroner, was she a Swede? Yes. What was her name? Elizabeth Gustafadsdottir was her maiden name. Elizabeth Stride was her married name. She was the wife of John Thompson Stride, a ship's carpenter. All right, I'm going to stop there and then play a short video. I don't know where to go. This would be neat. And this one's 10 Strange Facts About Jack the Ripper. And this is still the same channel, the Jack the Ripper Tour. I like this channel.
10 Strange Facts About Jack the Ripper. It is inevitable that a case such as the Whitechapel murders should result in some mysterious twists, bizarre turns, and spooky coincidences. So in this video, we are going to reveal 10 strange facts about Jack the Ripper. The funeral of Mary Nichols. The murder of Mary Ann Nichols took place in the early hours of the morning of Friday the 31st of August 1888 in Bucks Row, Whitechapel, and it caused a great deal of excitement in the district. So much so that when her funeral took place the following Thursday, the 6th of September 1888, the authorities were anxious to prevent the crowds that were gathering in the streets from disrupting the proceedings.
I'm going to upload those photos that I freaking forgot, as usual, from the live stuff behind. And then I think I have some from Jack the Ripper that I need to upload tonight. So I'm going to do that now so I don't forget.
One of the first problems to confront them was removing the body from the mortuary in Old Montague Street to the undertaker's in Hanbury Street without attracting the attention of the mob. The funeral directors therefore set in motion a ruse which bizarrely and coincidentally appears to have predicted not only the name of the next victim, but also the location of her murder. A horse-drawn hearse was observed making its way down Hanbury Street, and the crowds, which, according to newspaper reports, numbered some thousands, made way for it to go along Old Montague Street. But instead of so doing, it passed on into Whitechapel Road, and then doubling back, it reached the mortuary by the back gate, which was situated in Chapman's Court. The ruse appears to have worked, for only the undertaker and his men were present as the coffin was carried out of the mortuary, placed on the hearse, and taken to the undertaker's premises on Hanbury Street. How does this appear to have predicted the next victim and the location of the murder? Well, the coffin was taken from the mortuary's back door in Chapman's Court and removed to the undertaker's premises on Hanbury Street. 2 days later, Annie Chapman, the second victim of Jack the Ripper, would be murdered in Hanbury Street. Photographing the victim's eyes.
What?
An oft-reported fact concerning the police investigation into the Jack the Ripper murders.
I thought they covered,
is that the police actually
I could be wrong,
photographed
but I remember I watched it in the Jack the Ripper movie, but didn't they have, they put coins, close the eyes and put coins on them?
eyes of the victims in the hope that they would see the face of Jack the Ripper preserved upon their retinas. Optography, or the idea that the eyes were able to record the last image that a person saw before death, was a widespread and popular science in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. One of the earliest mentions that it might be used in the hunt for the Whitechapel murderer appeared in the Star newspaper on Thursday the 13th of September 1888 in relation to the murder of Annie Chapman. The article read, "Among the many suggestions made to the police is one urging that the pupils of the murdered woman's eyes should be photographed on the chance of the retina retaining an image of the murderer capable of reproduction."
That is weird.
Whether the police actually did photograph the eyes of any of the victims is uncertain, and only one police officer ever claimed that this was the case. Walter Dew was a young detective who was based at Commercial Street Police Station in 1888. On the morning of Friday the 9th of November, he was one of the first officers to arrive at number 13 Miller's Court, the scene of the murder of Jack the Ripper's final victim, Mary Kelly. In his autobiography, published many years later, he recalled the most striking memory of the scene that greeted him inside the tiny room. The mental picture of that sight which remains most vividly with me is the poor woman's eyes. They were wide open and seemed to be staring straight at me with a look of terror. Later in his memoirs, he claimed that Mary Kelly's eyes had indeed been photographed. "I have told you about the eyes of Mary Kelly, wide open and staring in death. To someone, those eyes suggested a possible clue. There was at the time a widespread superstition that the retina of a
We haven't
male
got
person's
to Mary
eyes
Kelly
would,
yet.
if photographed,
That one
give
was
a
the
picture
worst
of the
one.
last person upon whom the person had looked. I do not for a moment think that the police ever seriously expected the photograph of the murderer to materialize, but it was decided to try the experiment. Several photographs of the eyes were taken by expert photographers with the latest type cameras. The result was negative. But the very fact that this forlorn hope was tried shows that the police, in their eagerness to catch the murderer, were ready to follow any clue and to adopt any suggestion, even at the risk of being made to look absurd. It should be noted that the only source for this story is Walter Dew himself, and he was writing many years after the murders, and there is a possibility that
Oh,
he
they
may have
did do that to me?
exaggerated his
Thank
actual
you.
involvement in the investigation and
I've
his
got,
knowledge of the crimes and the methods adopted by the investigating officers.
what you were emailing
However,
me.
the idea that the police
It's
may
gonna
have
take me a
photographed
bit.
one of the victim's eyes soon became a widely circulated urban myth, and it still pops up from time to time. In the 1988 miniseries Jack the Ripper, starring Michael Caine, for example, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Charles Warren, turns up at Miller's Court, where he remarks to Inspector Frederick George Aberline, "The eyes of a dead person retain the last thing they've seen. That's what I've heard. The photographer's brought a special lens, just in case it's true."
Yes.
Did Catherine Eddowes know who the killer was?
Wow,
In
I
September
wonder.
1888, Catherine Eddowes and her lover, John Kelly, had made their annual journey to Kent in order to earn money picking hops. Unfortunately, thanks to the unusually wet summer of 1888, the hop yield had been disappointing, and unable to find much work, they had returned to London, arriving back in the capital on the afternoon of Friday the 28th of September 1888. That night they split up, and John Kelly went to a lodging house, whereas Catherine said she would seek a bed in the Shoe Lane casual ward. On Saturday the 13th of October 1888, a story appeared in the East London Observer which suggests that Catherine may have known the identity of the killer and may have put herself in danger. The story read, "A reporter gleaned some curious information from the casual ward superintendent of Mile End regarding Kate Eddowes, the Mitre Square victim. She was formerly well known in the casual ward there, but had disappeared for a considerable time until the Friday preceding her murder. Asking the woman where she had been in the interval, the superintendent was met with the reply that she had been in the country hopping. But, added the woman, I have come back to earn the reward offered for the apprehension of the Whitechapel murderer. I think I know him." "Mind he doesn't murder you too," replied the superintendent jocularly.
Wow.
"Oh, no fear of that," was the remark made by Kate Eddowes as she left. Within 24 hours afterwards, she was a mutilated corpse.
That's crazy.
Jack the Ripper's Black Bag. The body of Elizabeth Stride was found at 1 a.m. on the morning of Sunday, the 30th of September, 1888, in Dutfield's Yard, alongside the International Working Men's Educational Club in Berners Street. Around 30 minutes before the discovery of the body, Mrs. Fanny Mortimer had been standing outside her house at number 36 Berners Street, 3 doors along from the International Working Men's Educational Club, when she saw a young man come hurrying down Berners Street from the direction of Commercial Road. As she watched, he looked up at the club and then hurried around the next corner. Mrs. Mortimer then went back indoors, only to be brought out later by the commotion in the aftermath of the finding of the body in Dutfield's Yard. Later that day, she told a journalist that the only person she had seen in the street was the man with the shiny black bag. Her statement received widespread publicity and was greatly embellished in the months and even the years that followed. Reminiscing in his memoirs 50 years later, Walter Dew, a detective who had worked on the case, would credit Mrs. Mortimer with being the only person ever to see the Ripper in the vicinity of one of his crimes.
What?
It seems evident, however, that Walter Dew was either misremembering or had been influenced by later embellishments of this widely circulated story. Furthermore, it would appear that he was not kept particularly well informed by his superiors, for Mrs. Mortimer had most definitely not seen the Ripper in the vicinity of one of his crimes. Leon Goldstein was horrified when he heard local gossip about the suspicious-looking man seen hurrying away from the scene of the murder, carrying a shiny black bag. He told the police when he walked into Leman Street Police Station the next day, left a coffee house in Spectacle Alley only a short time before Mrs. Mortimer's sighting, and he had indeed hurried past her, carrying a shiny black bag full of empty cigarette boxes on his way home to nearby 22 Christian Street. Goldstein was not in any way related to the crime and was most certainly not the Whitechapel murderer. Yet his hasty dash home along Berners Street would furnish the killer with one of his most recognizable features. For although Mrs. Mortimer's sighting of him received widespread press
medical bag?
coverage, Leon Goldstein's self-identification and subsequent absolution by the police did not, and thus the shiny black bag became as integral a part of the murderer's reputed apparel as the top hat and the swirling cape.
There he is. That's what I envision him as, carrying that bag with that hat. I've always envisioned that.
A penny to view the murder site.
What? Really? They charge people?
The body of Annie Chapman was discovered at 6 a.m. on the morning of the 8th of September, 1888, in the backyard of number 29 Hanbury Street in Spitalfields. People living in the vicinity were genuinely shocked by the horror of what had occurred in their midst. However,
Really, they
by the end
charged.
of that day, people living on either side of the property had discovered an unforeseen benefit from the murder having occurred next door to them. As the Star newspaper reported in its evening edition, for several hours past, the occupants of the adjoining houses have been charging an admission fee of 1 penny to people anxious to view the spot where the body was found. Several hundreds of people have availed themselves of the opportunity, though all that can be seen are a couple of packing cases, from beneath which is the stain of a blood track. Catherine Eddowes' false name. On the morning of Saturday, the 29th of September, 1888, Catherine Eddowes pawned the boots of her lover, John Kelly, at a pawnbroker's shop and moneylender's on Church Street in Spitalfields. She gave her name as Jane Kelly of 6 Dorset Street. That evening, Police Constable Robinson of the City of London Police found her drunk on Aldgate High Street,
again.
and he arrested her and took her to Bishopsgate Police Station.
Found
Here she was
drunk
put
in
in
the
a cell
street.
to sober up, which she had done by midnight. At 1 o'clock in the morning, she was deemed sober enough to be released. On being asked for her name and address before leaving the police station, she gave a false name and said that her name was Mary Ann Kelly. So that morning, she had given the pawnbroker the false name of Jane Kelly, and at the police station, she had used the alias Mary Ann Kelly. The next victim of Jack the Ripper would be Mary Jane Kelly, who was murdered in Dorset Street on the 9th of November, 1888. A change of name because of Jack the Ripper. The location of the murder of Mary Ann Nichols on August the 31st, 1888, was Bucks Row in Whitechapel, and almost immediately Bucks Row became notorious throughout the country. It featured in numerous newspaper reports and it even became popular with sightseers who would, for several years after the murder, arrive there anxious to visit the site of the first Jack the Ripper atrocity. By 1892, the residents had had enough. They had long been ashamed of the infamy that the crime had brought to their thoroughfare. They were also, so tradition maintains, much annoyed by their postmen, who used to take an almost ghoulish delight in knocking on their doors and crying out things like, "Number 5, Killer's Row, I believe." They therefore raised a petition and approached the local council, asking that the name be changed to rid them of the notoriety associated with it. The council agreed to their proposal, and on the 25th of October, 1892, the name was changed from Bucks Row to Durwood Street, making it the only one of the murder sites, the name of which was changed as a direct result of a Jack the Ripper crime having occurred there. Mary Kelly, alive after death.
Yeah,
One
this
of the
is the
mysteries
worst
to
one.
confront us concerning the murder of Mary Kelly is the time at which it actually took
Okay.
place. The doctors who examined her body as it lay in her room
So right now, do you want me, no, like not right now, but for now, you want me just to read the whole script and then tell you what I think?
at number 13 Miller's Court were of the opinion that death had taken place at some stage between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. on the 9th of November 1888. This latter hour is certainly borne out by two of her neighbours who claimed that around 4 a.m. they were woken by a cry of murder. However, a curious aspect of Mary Kelly's murder is that sightings of her were reported several hours after she was supposed to have been dead. One of the more reliable witnesses who claimed to have seen her was Mrs. Caroline Maxwell, the wife of a lodging house deputy at 14 Dorset Street. She said that she saw Mary Kelly standing on the corner of Miller's Court between 8 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. on the morning of the 9th of November, 1888. "What brings you up so early?" Mrs. Maxwell asked Mary. "Oh, I do feel so bad," was Mary Kelly's reply. "I have the horrors of drink upon me, as I have been drinking for some days past."
They all have the horrors of drink.
Mrs. Maxwell suggested that Mary Kelly go to a local pub and have a half pint of beer. Mary told her that she had already done so, but had brought it all up again. And so saying, she pointed to some vomit in the roadway. Caroline Maxwell then went to purchase some milk from a shop on Bishopsgate, and returning at 9 a.m., she said she saw Mary Kelly talking to a man outside the Britannia pub at the junction of Dorset Street and Commercial Street. Mrs. Maxwell's statement was clearly at odds both with the doctor's opinion as to the time of Mary Kelly's death and the claims by the two neighbours that they heard her cry out at the time of her murder at 4 a.m. Over the years, several theories have been put forward to explain the discrepancy. Some hold that Caroline Maxwell was mistaken about the day, or that she was lying because she wanted her moment in the spotlight. Others argue that she mistook someone else for Mary Kelly. She did, after all, say that she had only actually spoken to Mary Kelly twice. Inevitably, it has been proffered that she saw Mary Kelly's ghost, whilst conspiracy theorists argue that she did in fact meet Mary Kelly and that the body inside 13 Miller's Court was that of someone else. Yet Caroline Maxwell's account of the meeting is consistent in both her police statement and her inquest testimony. Furthermore, the coroner at the inquest made a specific point of warning her that she was giving evidence under oath and pointing out that her testimony contradicted those of other witnesses. But Caroline Maxwell stuck to her story. Evidently, she was convinced that it was Mary Kelly she had seen between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. on the 9th of November, 1888, not somebody who looked like her or somebody who might have been wearing her clothes. Her sighting confronts us with yet another mystery and inconsistency concerning the Jack the Ripper case. And sadly, it is a mystery that is destined now to never be solved. Men dressed as women to catch Jack the Ripper. One of the intriguing aspects of the Jack the Ripper case is the number of disguises that various people employed in their endeavours to catch the killer. From fairly early on in the investigation, police officers in plain clothes were deployed on the streets of the area in the hope that they would be able to glean vital information that might lead to the apprehension of the perpetrator of the Whitechapel murders. However, the popular perception was that people could always tell the plainclothes men by their military gait and the fact that they often wore their policeman's boots, no matter what their disguise.
Good idea.
Journalists also took to the streets
All right,
wearing
I'll
all
read all
manner of
through it.
disguises, hoping that they would be able to obtain scoops for their newspapers. As for the type of disguises that were adopted, well, dressing up as women in order to try and attract the attention of the murderer was up there with the best of them. More than one man would find himself in an embarrassing situation when he was caught out on the streets of Whitechapel dressed in female attire. In the wake of the murders of Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, a newspaper reporter decided that he would make a serious attempt to land the murderer once and for all. Unfortunately, things didn't quite go according to plan. The Press Association told the story of what happened. On Monday morning, a newspaper reporter who has been on the lookout for the murderer for several nights past, thinking it quite possible that after the cool audacity of the murders of Sunday, he might possibly repeat the murder during Monday morning, shaved off his whiskers and moustache, and dressing himself as a woman, walked from his home in Leytonstone to Whitechapel
Smart
and made
idea,
the
though.
tour of the streets frequented by the assassin, passing several detectives and constables on the way.
What are you
He was
talking
unmolested
about?
until after he had covered a great deal of ground. Upon getting into Whitechapel Road again, however, he was pounced upon by Police Constable Ludwig, who said, "Stop, you are a man." Seeing that it was useless to deny it, the reporter admitted the fact, upon which he was asked, "Are you one of us?" He answered to the negative, and he explained to the officer why the disguise had been adopted. The constable, however, said that he must take the reporter to the police station, and he was accordingly conveyed to Lehman Street, where the inspector on duty, after several questions, said, "I must detain you until inquiries are made." After a delay of about an hour and a half, the officer was satisfied of the reporter's bona fides, and he was liberated. Constable Ludwig's asking the reporter, "Are you one of us?" suggests that there may well have also been plainclothes police officers out on the streets disguised as women, although this was never officially confirmed. We do, however, know of at least one policeman who most certainly did don female attire in his attempts to catch Jack the Ripper. In the early hours of the morning of Tuesday, the 8th of October, 1888, Detective Sergeant John Robinson of the Metropolitan Police's G Division was approached by some Italians on Eyre Street Hill in Clerkenwell and informed that a man who answered the description of the Whitechapel murderer had been seen in the company of a woman who had hastily left him. They told the police officer that the man had entered a cab yard in Phoenix Place in Clerkenwell. Sensing an opportunity to run the perpetrator of the East End atrocities to ground, the plucky Sergeant Robinson borrowed a woman's hat and a mantle. Sadly,
love
the
all the
newspaper didn't
photos.
reveal who he borrowed the clothing from, and went in search of the suspicious man. Robinson entered the cab yard and hid himself
welcome.
behind some cabs so that he could keep an eye out and hopefully apprehend the suspect should he appear. Unfortunately for him, the sight of a man wearing a woman's hat and cloak hiding in the shadows attracted the attention of several cab washers, and they approached the detective demanding to know what he was up to. Robinson told them that he was a police officer and asked them to go away, which they did. But then two other cab washers, James Phillips and William Jarvis, approached him and asked,
Washers?
"What are you messing about here for?" Robinson whipped off his woman's hat and informed them that he was a police officer, whereupon Jarvis punched him. Robinson seized Jarvis by the coat, and in the subsequent scuffle, Jarvis drew a pocket knife and stabbed the officer above the left eye. The detective drew his truncheon from under his mantle and went to strike Jarvis on the hand. However, he missed and instead struck him a heavy blow across the head. At this
I did
point,
not know
several
this.
other officers and members of the public intervened, and Jarvis and Phillips were taken into custody. Sadly, the suspect, whom Robinson was keeping under surveillance, used the confusion to make good his escape.
Wow.
You said it was clear.
I said the front was clear.
At their subsequent court appearance on Tuesday, the 30th of October, 1888, Jarvis would be sentenced to 6 weeks in prison, whilst Phillips would be acquitted. And as for the plucky Detective Robinson, well, it doesn't seem to
Plucky
have struck
detective.
anyone to ask him why he opted to disguise himself as a woman in order to apprehend the suspect. Nor, for that matter, did any of the journalists covering the subsequent trial of the two men, at which Robinson gave evidence, reveal what outfit the detective chose to wear to court. Dr. Bernardo met Elizabeth Stride just before her murder.
Dr. Bernardo.
The murder of Elizabeth Stride had taken place on the 30th of September, 1888. On the 9th of October, Dr. Thomas Bernardo wrote to the Times to claim that he had actually met Elizabeth Stride a few days before she had been murdered. At the time, Bernardo was campaigning to make it illegal for the keepers of common lodging houses to admit young children. Instead, he proposed that special shelters be set up exclusively for minors. He decided to find out how this would be viewed by that class of unhappy women who had no abode but the common lodging house.
He's running for you.
And so, one night in late September, he visited 32 Flower and Dean Street, where Elizabeth Stride was lodging. He detailed his experience in his letter to the Times. In the kitchen, there were many persons, some of them being girls and women of the same unhappy class as that to which poor Elizabeth Stride belonged. The company soon recognized me, and the conversation turned upon the previous murders. The female inmates of the kitchen seemed thoroughly frightened at the dangers to which they were presumably exposed. In an explanatory fashion, I put before them the scheme which had suggested itself to my mind, by which children, at all events, could be saved from the contamination of the common lodging houses and the streets, and so, to some extent, the supply cut off, which feeds the vast ocean of misery in this great city. The pathetic part of my story is that my remarks were manifestly followed with
Looks
deep
like a
interest
restaurant
by
with those
all the women. Not a
like
single
big
scoffing voice was
benches.
raised in ridicule or opposition. One
It's
poor
weird because
creature,
we
who had
have one
evidently
in
been
a
drinking,
restaurant or a bar down
exclaimed
here
somewhat
where I live.
bitterly to the following effect: "We're all up to no good, and no one cares what becomes of us.
Little
Perhaps some of us
booths.
will be killed next." And then she added, "If somebody had helped the likes of us long ago, we would never have come to this." Impressed by the unusual manner of the people, I could not help noticing their appearance somewhat closely, and I saw how evidently some of them were moved. I have since visited the mortuary in which were lying the remains of the poor woman Stride, and I at once recognized her as one of those who stood around me in the kitchen of the common lodging house on the occasion of my visit last Wednesday week. Bernardo was so moved by this first-hand experience that he promptly purchased a property in Flower and Dean Street and converted it into a licensed common lodging house for young girls.
Good for
From the day
him.
it opened, each bunk was filled every night.
Wow.
So there you have 10 strange facts about Jack.
I didn't know like any of that. So that's good to hear. All right, I'm gonna get off here. I gotta use the phone booth and do a couple other things. I posted all the photos from tonight and yesterday, so they're all in my community tab. All right, thanks for joining me, guys. You have a good night. And yeah, we'll be back tomorrow, Kimmy, at 7 p.m. I have a friend that wants to also join the panel at some point. She is a doctor and has seen many of the abuse as well, so she'll have some input, but you and I will run the show and have her up after or during or whatever, if that's right with you. I just figure the more people, the better. All right, I'll see you tomorrow at 7 then. Bye.